Hit record. So, hi. If people who are watching and listening, I'm here with my good friend, Kathy Long, and I'm here in Northern California where it's like 5:30 in the evening on an early September day, and the sun is just starting to come down behind the trees over there. And but Kathy, you tell everybody where you are, because that might be interesting to know.
Well, I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm here with my good friend Cynthia Cummins, who is in Northern California. But in Tokyo, we just came out of a typhoon. It was the last of the typhoon last night, and it broke a heat wave, which was just very impressionable. We lost a lot of sweat in those days, but now it's over and the skies are clear.
And it's morning
Humidity,
there, right?
and it's morning. It's 9:30 or
Okay.
9:32 now.
Yeah. I mean, if I drank, I'd be having a cocktail now, but instead I'm having a sparkling water flavored with grapefruit. Um,
Nice.
and
And I'm having a coffee from an origami coffee pack from Caldi and
oh,
a bit of milk.
oh, nice,
My
nice.
smoothie mug.
I love it. And I tried to put on some lipstick, but I just did a workout and I'm in my sweaty t-shirt. And I think you said, Kathy, that you haven't even washed your face.
I haven't washed my face. This morning I got up and I did a bit of meditation. That's kind of something I'm trying to integrate into my life practice,
Mhm,
15 minutes every
mhm,
morning.
mhm.
And then I'm doing a wall Pilates session for 10 minutes. And then I spoke to the artist who's going to give us a lecture next week at the College Women's Association of Japan's
Mhm.
show kickoff meeting.
Mhm.
And I'm the co-chair of that body. And we're preparing for our print show, which is coming up in October. And it's the way that we raise funds to support scholarships for Japanese women to study abroad and for foreign women to study in Japan.
Cool.
Yeah.
If we get to the point where I have something like show notes, we'll put some information in about that, right? But but for today, I'm glad you mentioned
Yeah.
meditation because that reminded me that so Kathy and I met each other through writing. Without going into a whole big thing, we were at a writing workshop at a Zen center in California. And I don't know, that's been a while ago, but we've become fast friends. And so we were at another workshop. I was leading it. I'll just mention that. I was leading the workshop. And
You should.
and it was we had a long drive back to the Bay Area from the workshop, and we'd been meditating and doing all that Zen stuff. But then we got in the car and we listened to some loud music for a little while. And then we hit the freeway, and it's a fairly boring drive, honestly, up the 101. And so we started telling a story, and that's where this idea came from. What we're going to do today is we're going to try and tell a story the way we did in the car, just kind of taking turns telling a story, and we'll see what we get. But so there's some tie-in to meditation, Japan, whatever, right? Um,
Indeed, there is.
all right. So
So I
uh,
could pretend to read from this.
oh, no. Oh, are you? So here we go. I'm going to
Yes.
start it. I'm going to start it. Um, Beverly, that's kind of an old-fashioned name. And Beverly was keenly aware of this because, you know, she had a lot of friends with names like Zoe or Brittany, but she was Beverly. And she's had a few years back installed this really cool open shelving in her kitchen. And the contractor who they'd hired, her husband, Jeff, um, had a hard time with this contractor, but the contractor that they hired put this open shelving in, and sure enough, one of the shelves was crooked right from the get-go. And rather than get in a fight about it, they just lived with it. And then Beverly came into the kitchen one morning and saw that this ceramic vase that she had bought at a flea market a few weeks ago had crashed and fallen first onto the countertop and then slid onto the floor. So there it was in pieces on the floor of her kitchen.
Yeah. And she thought about that contractor and she realized that the reason she didn't get her opinion out or didn't speak to him earlier was because she was so attracted to him. And so she kind of let her husband be in charge, which wasn't her MO usually. But I think what really impressed her from the beginning with the contractor was that he spelled her name correctly. Beveley. And that was just, no, actually, her name wasn't spelled Ley.
There was an R in there, but he put an E in the Ley. That's what counts, right?
Anyway, she really just had the hots for this contractor. He just, he came in, he did the measurements, and maybe she distracted him a little bit because he wasn't really focused on putting that shelf up straight. She was a bit sick of her husband because he was always managing things. And sometimes she just let him manage it into the ground because she knew that he wasn't really doing it correctly. And he knew also she was judging him. So the whole thing just became a mess.
Right. Yeah, it's when she first met him, she'd liked the way that he seemed to take control of things and always seemed to know what to do. But now that she'd been with him for a long time, it had become clear to her that he didn't really know what to do. He just thought he did. And it was important to him to be the one who was, directing things. And so he was even directing the contractor from the minute that the contractor walked into the kitchen and got out his measuring tape. There was Jeff, blah, 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 telling the contractor how things had to be. And all that she could focus on, and this caught her by surprise. Like she she was really blindsided by this. When he took his measuring tape off his tool belt, she found herself fascinated by the tool belt itself. So everything that happened that morning after that was kind of a blur to her because she took in the place where the hammer would go. She noticed the pocket in front and wondered what you might put in that pocket. She saw how the leather was kind of worn in places and how the tool belt sat really comfortably on his hips. And he had on a pair of painter's pants, which she used to wear those back in high school, but she'd never really paid attention to how they fit anybody else.
That's, yeah. And that kind of brought her back to her youth and how she had married a bit young. She and Jeff had gotten together at the end of high school, and she got pregnant pretty quickly. And so they ended up getting married. And so at the time that the contractor came in, she was 40 years old. Her kids were already, their two children had already gone off to college. And she felt like, you know, she was just starting to understand something about life. And this contractor was actually a bit older than her. He was probably in his 50s. And she, again, something that like bothered her was that she was, putting him maybe on a pedestal already, even in their brief encounter before she even knew him. And it was a physical attraction, but also that he knew how to do something. And she wondered that about herself. What was she looking for? What was she trying to get at with Jeff, who she realized was, didn't know anything more than anybody else. And this contractor, whose name was Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was strange to her that, like, an older person of middle age would have kind of a child's name.
Right. But Billy was a reliable name. She knew that. She knew that it was a reliable name. It was as reliable as the truck he pulled up in, which was, a Ford F-150 is, I think, what the model is, that it's the best-selling truck in California. At least some years, it's the best-selling truck. And she only knew that because she heard some people talking about it at Ace Hardware one day. There was a whole debate because the F-150, they were coming up with a new electric model that wouldn't take gas. And the whole idea of a truck without gasoline was strange. And Billy, his truck was definitely a gas-fired engine. It was an older model. It was kind of beat up green color that wouldn't be very popular on the lot right now. But there was something kind of comforting about that color. It was like the color of a tree. It was the color of Forest Service green. It was oddly reliable, just like his name.
Yeah, and the thing she liked also about the truck was that there were built-in compartments for different things that he might be using or need to use during the day. And everything was super organized with like one of those liners in the truck bed. And then he had built in the shelf behind with drawers for screws and nuts and bolts and various things. So she was kind of fascinated by him. But the thing was, although she had children young, she had continued to go to school and she was an engineer herself. And so she liked that, she liked that there were people who did very practical things And sometimes she felt like she was just writing out the plans for these things.
Right. And of course, all Jeff had was an iPad. Like he loved just walking around with that big old iPad of his, consulting it, like looking stuff up, using his he'd started to use AI and stuff. Anytime there was a question, Jeff was like going to Chat GPT to find out what the answer was. And through the whole construction project, which had gone on for 3 or 4 months, she had really appreciated the morning coffee whenever Billy would come to work. They'd have a few minutes, usually alone or with Jeff just kind of meandering around the living room adjacent to the kitchen, looking at his iPad or talking on the phone. But she could ask Billy a real question like, did you see the sun setting last night? There was an odd orange color in the sky.
And he seemed to appreciate that because normally his clients, were more particular about what he would be doing for the day, and he couldn't really relax and get into the work because they were just so on top of him. But he enjoyed those conversations where they could just, take a look at the world around them more than just focusing on this project, which he had a good idea of what to do and how he was going to do it. He had planned it all out and shared those plans both with Billy and with Beverly. I mean, sorry, with Jeff and Beverly.
Mhm.
And Billy just, he didn't have that many people to speak to in his life about just mundane, everyday things like the sunset.
Sometimes when she saw his face in the morning, her feelings of loneliness increased in measure with the loneliness she saw in his face. And it was a connection that really meant something to her somehow, even though it was never articulated. But then the job was finished and Billy was paid, and she hadn't seen him. She didn't see him. He was gone. And now it was back to life as usual. Jeff and her going to the occasional, hmm?
I said, and the crooked shelf.
Yeah, well, so they were, back to life as usual, but she had begun to notice, I don't know, in the previous weeks, she had begun to notice how the shelf was starting to droop a little more. And Jeff even said something about it. He was complaining that that shelf, there were 6 of them. And why was it that the one was starting to slope? And she'd said, it sloped right from the beginning, right from the beginning. We probably should have said something back then. Um, and Jeff said, it's really too late to do anything about it. And so that was when, as she was looking at the vase broken on the floor, she realized that she had filled it with gravel. And she had been putting other things on the shelf over the last few weeks. But why did she fill that vase with gravel to set it on the shelf, if not to increase the odds that the shelf would be compromised or that the vase would break? And this was like a revelation to her as she stood there in her bare feet and her bathrobe. And as Jeff came wandering into the kitchen and said, "Oh my God, what happened here?" What she was wondering was, where did all that gravel come from?
And as Jeff said that to her, it was almost accusatory, like he was blaming her for the crooked shelf and the vase falling off and the gravel all over the kitchen. And she had taken that gravel from the driveway, and because they had not concrete, not asphalt, they had kind of a driveway that had some dirt with gravel on top of it for traction. And she had just rinsed off some of that extra gravel and put it in the vase because she wanted to, in her mind, put these dried flowers in there. But then,
And that
you
would
know,
anchor them,
that
right?
would but in hindsight, maybe she had wanted to challenge the shelves' ability to stay up. And it did become like a symbol of her marriage. And she wanted to just see how much it could take when it was crooked from the beginning. And Jeff's tone of blame just irritated her to no end. And she decided right then to call Billy and maybe ask him about more than just the shelf.
So she couldn't have articulated that or even brought it to an intentional, conscious level at that moment. What she really thought was, I need to take control here. You know, Jeff thinks he's in control, but I'm going to call Billy and see if he can come over and fix this. And so she said it. She saw that Jeff was looking through his iPad to find Billy's phone number. And she said, "You know what? I have it in my phone. I'll just text him today and see when he can come out." And sure enough, Billy's truck pulled up about an hour later, just as Jeff was getting ready to go to the office. Jeff just waved and gestured for Billy to go on in. And there she was in her bathrobe with the vase and the gravel still on the kitchen floor.
Some days Beverly just thought that it was all too much and she just couldn't even handle picking up that gravel, getting the brush and dustpan, you know, moving the rug away. She knew she couldn't use the vacuum because those gravel pieces would chew it all up. And it just was too much. So she just left it, took her coffee and sat on the sofa. She was working from home, supposedly, but really she was just spending a lot of time these days staring out the window. And she saw Jeff pull away. He was going to his job as a management consultant in the nearby city.
Mhm.
They lived about an hour outside of the city, which was far enough to like put them in a wooded area in a nice house, a good distance away from their neighbors. And Billy didn't live that close, but when he got that message, he just felt he had to go right away. And he was a contractor, and so sometimes he would, give precedence to one job over another, depending where they were. And he just decided to go straight there from the other side of the city to their house. And she saw him drive up.
She saw him drive up, but somehow she suddenly just felt so heavy, so much heavier than ever. And she couldn't even get up off the sofa. And Billy, he knocked, he opened the door, he called out. She didn't answer. He came in and stood for a minute looking at the shelf because she had texted him that that's what was wrong. He looked at the shelf and then he looked at the floor and saw the vase and the gravel. And it was at this moment that Beverly found herself weeping. And she didn't even have a Kleenex box nearby. She just picked up the collar on her robe and started dabbing her eyes with it. And Billy was seemed dumbfounded. But then he came over and he said, "Come outside with me."
And it was as if he was a snake charmer because she just stood up and followed him out the door. And right behind their house, there was some pine trees and a couple of random wild bushes that had some berries on them. And he walked over and he took a berry, it was a blackberry, and handed it to her.
Now, this was odd. I mean, she was pretty sure that he wasn't in the habit of picking blackberries very often. But she accepted it and she put it in her mouth and never had a blackberry tasted so sweet. And all she could do was smile at him. He smiled back, but it seemed like to her, it seemed like that was enough for now. Just to have the gift of the blackberry, the gift of walking outside was plenty. And it brought her down, it calmed her down. She felt her feet on the earth and she felt like, I can handle anything. Maybe everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Would you like me to finish the story now? Or do you have an idea?
Go ahead.
So they walked back inside and Billy was there for about an hour. She went and took a shower, sort of numb to any thought or worries, or certainly there'd been many times when she'd been in the shower and had these kind of vague fantasies about Billy or some other faceless contractor who might interrupt her shower time. But strangely, those thoughts didn't even come into her head today. By the time she'd finished her shower and dried her hair, and put on her a modicum of makeup, she came out and he was done. He was wrapping up. He left. Her husband came home. later. I got out and found it back in shelf. Sure enough. Okay, I'm back. Did you hear me for any of that time?
I heard Jeff come back.
Okay. All right. So Jeff came back. You heard him that he got out his level.
No.
Okay. All right. So I'll go back to this. So Jeff, who she'd only ever seen with an iPad in his hand, went into the garage and found a level in their box of tools. He brought it back. He set it on the shelf, and sure enough, the little bubble did not float into the middle like it should. And he said, well, this is what you get these days. This is what you get. And that's all that he had to say. They passed the evening quietly enough. They had hamburgers for dinner on the grill. They watched the latest installment of a Netflix series that they were following. They went to bed. The next morning was just like any morning. Jeff on his iPad, Beverly in her bathrobe. He went off to work, and she got in the car and drove straight down to the nearest Ace Hardware store and bought a new vase that she filled with gravel and set on the shelf that very morning. That's
Very
my
good.
end. That's my end.
I like it. Lots of metaphors there.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop. So that's our story for today, everybody. I'm gonna stop recording. Let's see.